All right, let's do another redraft, or as I will call them from now on. Why do you hate Bobby Ryan? I don't. I genuinely don't hate people when I do these redrafts. That's not a thing. I look at these lists and I say, if I was a GM and I'm going up there and if I have a crystal ball, I know the future, then I'm drafting this guy. I'm drafting this guy, and that's where I'm going with it. Now, the 2008 draft is really, really interesting. The 2008 draft, a lot of good defensemen in that draft. A lot of them. And I mean, we were talking Norris Trophy level. So trying to pick between them, it's like trying to pick between your kids. But as people know about me, it's easy to pick between kids. You're the favorite, Billy. No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Your sister's my favorite, Billy. Billy's so dumb. Dad, I could still hear you. So, yeah, top 30 picks. So 1 through 30. And when we look at the original draft, it is interesting in that Bogosian stands out at number 3 overall. That was, of course, Atlanta, not Winnipeg, but I don't have an Atlanta magnet. So Bogosian and Dalton Levier were picked. Now, when you consider that the next pick was Pietrangelo, if Atlanta picks him, and if Atlanta with that number 29 pick had gone, hey, this Roman Josi kid in the second round, we should get him, you'd have a completely different picture. You'd have Pietrangelo and Josi in Atlanta. And who knows, right? Who knows what might have happened with the team from there, and maybe things click for them, and maybe management would have been a lot smarter about things, and building leases would have been all caught up and all that stuff. And who knows, they might still have been in Atlanta. So a lot of what ifs when it comes to the Thrashers. But Stamkos going at number 1 overall to the Tampa Bay Lightning was seen as, the future megastar of the team, and he's basically lived up to that potential. He's had injuries that have sidelined him at points, but he has lived up to that potential. Luke Schenn stands out for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's an honorable mention in this, as is Lucas Spiza. They are both honorable mentions, both fringe defensemen, and that's not what was envisioned for Schenn when he was drafted. Nikita Filatov, when he was drafted by Columbus, there was some belief he was going to be a megastar in the league, and it never quite happened. He didn't really adapt to that game. Mikhail Bodker, I don't have him in the redraft being a first-rounder. He's been toiling with the Senators this year, and it's been a precipitous drop for Bodker in terms of his career, and I'm not sure what happened or where. Cody Hodgson, of course, 328 games in his career between Vancouver and Buffalo, and then Nashville, I believe, at the end there. And yeah, Hodgson never quite lived up to that advanced billing. There was a belief when he was drafted that he was going to be the future captain of the team, and he had everything they needed, and then it just didn't work out. Kyle Beach. So, for people who remember when Cody Hodgson was drafted, there were some, myself included, that said, excellent pick, great pick, glad they took him. But there were some vocal hockey fans who thought Tyler Myers, with his physical gifts on the blue line, he should have been a first-round pick for the Canucks at 10. And there were plenty of people as well that thought Kyle Beach, who went at 11, might become the steal of the draft. And going to Chicago, there was plenty of fist shaking, and I can't believe Chicago got the steal of the draft with Kyle Beach. Just shows that the armchair GMs can be wrong as often as the regular ones. Colton Tubert then went at 13. He played 24 games in his NHL career. Zach Boychuk, 14th overall that year to Carolina. He played 127 games in his NHL career. Joel Colborne, 295 games played in his NHL career. He's drafted by Boston right after Erik Karlsson. So the Kings could have drafted Doughty and Karlsson that year. Or Karlsson. Jake Gardner went up next, and then Chet Pickard, showing why you don't draft goaltenders in the first round. Chet Pickard went 18th overall, doesn't play a game in the NHL. Del Zotto at 20 right after Spiza. Del Zotto is not in the first round that I'm doing here, the redraft, so I guess honorable mention of Michael Del Zotto as well. Fringe defenseman on the board in that top 20 that they can fill in, they can play top 6, but very often they can end up being the number 7 or perhaps end up in the minors. Anton Gustafsson went to Washington, and that was a miss. No games played for him, but then they hit later in that round with John Carlson. They made up for it, and then some. Jordan Eberle goes to Edmonton. We can debate what happened after they had him and what they got for him in trade, but Eberle's been an excellent player. Tyler Kuma went to the Minnesota Wild, and he played 1 game in the NHL. Matthias Tedemby played 120 games with the New Jersey in the NHL. I'm trying to remember. I think Tedemby was in New Jersey his entire career, but he may have gotten moved at some point. And he's of course not in the NHL now. Greg Nemish, 15 games played for him for Calgary. Tyler Ennis went after him, John Carlson, Victor Tikhonov, who was a reclamation project as well after this. And, a couple of different teams, including Arizona, have tried their shot with him, and it just hasn't quite worked out. 111 games for him. Dalton Levier doesn't play a game in the NHL, drafted by Atlanta. And then Tom McCollum. Again, that's the risk of drafting goalies in the first round. Played a grand total of 3 games in the NHL. And there were a couple of good goalies in this draft. So, you guys are in luck. I already did this video, had it all done, and then realized there was a major omission in my redraft. So I have to redo it, kind of. In that all I had to do was take the major omission and plug it in where I thought it would go in the draft, and everybody else stays in the same spot. So I've done this. Should take a little bit less time. Number 1 overall does not change. I'm not going to stand here and argue that Stamkos was a mistake at number 1, or that if I was drafting at number 1 overall, I'm not still taking Steven Stamkos. I think Stamkos is that good. And, I know he's been through his share of injuries, but I think he's still that good. And when you look at Tampa, he's been very consistent. He does need to work on his Game 7s. Yes, next Game 7, he needs to go out there and get a hat trick or 4 points or something along those lines to shut down that narrative that he struggles in those big games. But, again, there have been players, legends who came before him that was leveled on them, and then they would have that breakthrough game and they'd win a title, and then that went away. At number 2, I'm not changing number 2. Now, I could argue that there are other defensemen in this draft who you could take it to. You could argue Erik Karlsson, you could argue John Carlson, you could argue Alex Pietrangelo, and you could argue Roman Josi. But for me, Doughty would still be the guy to go. He has the offense, the defense. He can play all those minutes. He can get hits. He's a tough player, and he's a leader. So there really isn't anything about Doughty that makes me say, well, if LA was redoing it today, knowing what we know now, they wouldn't draft Doughty. At 3, I'm thinking Atlanta's not drafting Zach Bogosian. Bogosian still does get into the first round. He still makes it, but he's not at number 3. So moving up, over his career, Roman Josi's been one of the most underrated defensemen in the National Hockey League. He is. And first off, he was a second to Shea Weber, and he's been an afterthought with other defensemen that came through Nashville as well. Nashville's had plenty of really good defensemen. I could rattle them off for days, but Josi has emerged right now as one of the best defensemen in the league. At the time of the pause, he's right there with John Carlson. And for me, over his overall body of work, I would take Josi. You can make the argument against Josi if you want. That's fine. But I'm taking Josi. Now next up, moving up from all the way down here to number 4 is John Carlson. So John Carlson, who was 27th in the original draft, moves up to number 4 because he's fantastic. And his game is still fantastic, and he's been good the whole way through. So yes, you can make the argument of, well, Erik Karlsson was great. Oh, absolutely, yes. Erik Karlsson has been great for large portions of his career. John Carlson, for me, has consistently been excellent from the first game he played in the NHL until now, and so I go with John Carlson. Now, next up, Toronto, and that's where things get interesting. The idea of Erik Karlsson going to Toronto. And look at that blue line you're starting to put together. Doughty, Josi, and the 2 Carlsons, John and Erik. That's pretty decent top 4 right there. That's going to win you some games. So while this draft, it's thin at forward, it is excellent on the blue line. And the goaltending's pretty good too. So yes, you have a miss in Pickard, and you have a miss with McCollum, but it's still a pretty good defense and pretty good goaltending in this draft. But yeah, Karlsson makes it 4 defensemen in a row. There's a run on defensemen a couple of times in this draft because the blue line was really quite excellent. And that run continues with the next pick. So if you're a St. Louis fan going, well, wait, he forgot Pietrangelo. No, Pietrangelo wasn't the one I missed. Pietrangelo was not the one I forgot the first take on this. But Alex Pietrangelo drops from 4 to 6, not because he's a guy that would drop in the draft, but because you have John and Erik Karlsson in this draft. So, yeah, Pietrangelo drops to 6 just because you've got Erik Karlsson, John Carlson, and Roman Josi. And if you want to take Pietrangelo ahead of those three, cool. If you want to take Erik Karlsson ahead of those guys, yeah, fine. But that's a pretty excellent top four. It's an expensive top four. You're probably going to go broke if you have those four on your blue line. And you're going to be kind of the inverse of Toronto, where you have four forwards to make all that money, so it's hard to make the rest of the roster deep, talented, and established. And in this case, you'd have four defensemen. That means your forward group is going to be it's going to be lacking in some depth with the amount of money those four guys are going to make. They're going to command quite a bit. At number 7, a goaltender gets into this draft, and it shows just what an excellent draft the Washington Capitals had. So Braden Holtby was originally drafted 93rd overall by the Washington Capitals, who drafted Karlsson. So you can look at the Anton Gustafsson pick and say, what a miss. They made up for it. Holtby at 93 originally moves up to number 7 and goes to Nashville. No, Nashville not really in the market for a goaltender at the time, but Holtby, absolutely fantastic. All he's done is win at the NHL level. UFA this summer, and we'll see what the Washington Capitals do, because now they have Samsonov, who looks like he's going to be absolutely fantastic as well. But Holtby had his run. Holtby had an amazing run. I remember him, folding his arms across his chest against Boston and thinking, I hate that he's beating us, but I love the style and the flair he's showing and beating us. So yeah, I have Braden Holtby going at 7. At number 8, we go off the board. Adam Henrique at 82. And that's Mikhail Bodker, who was taken in that spot, and Bodker doesn't factor into this draft. He's not taken in the top round. Again, the season he was having this year, just miserable year, and I can't take him in the redraft. Number 9. And you could argue maybe this guy ahead of Henrique, but I love Henrique's game. So that's why Henrique goes as high as he does there. Gustav Nyquist, 121st overall. Yeah, he was taken 121st by the Detroit Red Wings. The Detroit Red Wings, their European scouting has been fantastic for decades. And it's evening out with the rest of the league. So it's not as much that Detroit doesn't still do it, it's that the rest of the league is catching up. And it looks like the difference now with Yzerman is maybe he's scouting the German players a little bit more. He took Seider in the draft last year, which was a surprise. And maybe that's to make up for the fact that they don't have that advantage internationally that they did when they took Nyquist at 121, because he'd go to 9th in the redraft, which pushes Josh Bailey down. But Josh Bailey only drops one spot. Josh Bailey goes to Vancouver instead of Cody Hodgson. And I remember the Islanders trading around in that round and ending up with Bailey, and there being some head scratching about Bailey and why they did that and whether or not that was smart. But, Bailey's turned out to be a pretty good forward. Took him a while to get there, but pretty solid forward. And obviously, if you're a Canucks fan, Bailey did stick around in the NHL longer than Hodgson. But if the Canucks at 10 had drafted Josh Bailey with Hodgson still on the board, and they had passed on Myers, Beach, and Hodgson, and Bodker and Wilson dropping in it, there would have been some not very nice words directed towards Vancouver management at that point, which is unusual for Canucks. Canucks fans are very respectful of management in general. I've seen that online. Very respectful. I think this is a wonderful job being, and they're consistent. Every single general manager, endless praise. Number 11 goes all the way back to Pat Quinn when they called him Stan Pat. Number 11, actually, to go back to Harry Neal. I've heard plenty about Harry Neal as well. So it's not Kyle Beach going at 11. It's Cam Atkinson, who was originally the 157th overall pick. Cam Atkinson is an excellent goal scorer for Columbus. If you want to argue him ahead of Bailey or Nyquist or even Henrique, okay. Again, if I'm doing this draft, this is the order I'm picking him in. And Atkinson, pretty solid forward. Most of these guys are paid very, very well, and they're paid very, very well for a reason. It's a pretty solid overall bunch. But again, the forward group is not quite of the same level as the defense. Next up at 12, so instead of Tyler Myers, I'm going to have Buffalo taking Jordan Eberle, who ended up going to Edmonton instead. So you go from Tyler Myers to Jordan Eberle, which I think is an upgrade. Eberle's had a pretty good year this year. And just think of Eberle on the wing with Eichel. Be pretty darn solid. So Eberle, he's had his ups and downs, but for me, I would have him ahead of Tyler Myers right now. Number 13, and at 13, this is where if people want to call me a homer, they can. I would totally understand if they wanted to do that. But I have LA, who didn't need a goaltender, drafting Jacob Markstrom at 31. He was originally drafted by Florida. It took a long time for Markstrom to get to where he is. But he's been excellent for the Canucks for 2+ years. Absolutely fantastic. The Canucks are in the playoff picture and playoff conversation in the West because of Jacob Markstrom. That's it. They were pushing for first in their division because of Jacob Markstrom. So, yes, I'm hard on the Canucks, but I'm also praising of Jacob Markstrom. I think he's had an amazing year, and he had an amazing year last year as well. So this isn't just a one and done. This isn't like potentially him being a flash in the pan. He was pretty darn good last year too. So at number 14, underrated forward, was not taken in the first round initially, and that's Derek Stepan, who went 51st overall in the original draft. Stepan would score more if he didn't play in Arizona. Probably not a first-line center. Shouldn't be a first-line center. But at the same time, he would get a lot more attention if he was playing in, say, Toronto or Montreal. And I think he'd get more points if he wasn't playing. Like, Arizona's style, it's like it just puts a blanket over these guys and they can't break out of it. Very similar with Dallas, where it just seems like the style holds the guys back too. So after Stepan, we go with another goaltender. The often ridiculed, but not by me, Jake Allen. Jake Allen, there's something where psychologically he can have that break, where he has a couple of miserable weeks where he looks terrible, and then he'll just turn it on. I think with the right coaching, I think with the right attitude, I think with the right treatment, Jake Allen can still be a number one goaltender in the National Hockey League. And again, he's had a very good season for St. Louis. His record on the road was fantastic. So Binnington was pretty darn near unbeatable at home, and Allen was great on the road. Pretty solid tandem right there. And so I still have Jake Allen going higher than he did originally, which was 34th. And he was a highly thought-of prospect when he was drafted that year, too. Pretty good year for goaltenders overall. Got Holtby, Markstrom, and Allen on the board. That's three pretty darn solid goaltenders. Again, it just the forward depth is not of that same level. Next spot, the Boston Bruins. I have them picking Tyler Myers. So we're going to get a run on defensemen here. I have Myers at the top. Honestly, this is where you can make an argument for almost anybody out of this list to be the top of this list. A list which includes at the next spot, moving up from 156th overall, where he's originally drafted by the Islanders, Jared Spurgeon. So 156th and 157th, good picks that year, back to back. Spurgeon and Atkinson at 156th and 157th. This is why mid to late round draft picks can sometimes work out. I mean, your odds are lower, but it can still work. So yeah, I have Spurgeon there, and then to keep the debate going, because I know that'll be the debate coming out of this, is where I have the defenseman. And I have TJ Brody next up at 114. Again, these guys are really close. And so Brody for me with the Flames drafted 114th. That's a fantastic pick for them. And then in the next spot, another defenseman. So a few years back, I was doing, I did a video on the top 10 defensemen in the league, top 20, and I had Justin Schultz in it. And he's not a top 20 defenseman now, but I do think that if he can stay healthy and he gets the right opportunity, I think he can bounce back and be an excellent top four defenseman in the NHL. Almost said forward. Top four defenseman in the NHL. And again, we're into this area where Myers, Spurgeon, Brody, and Schultz. You can make an argument for any of them. Next up, moving up in the draft as well, another defenseman. Told you there'd be a run on defenseman. And there's a run on defenseman. Jason Demers. I have seen people say he's excellent, he's underrated. I've also seen people say, oh, Demers sucks. So it all depends on perspective and points of view. And yeah, Jason Demers I have going 20th overall to New York Rangers rather than Delzato. Delzato is not in this draft. I didn't put him into the redraft. And he's got a cup ring though, so there's that. But yeah, I don't have Delzato. At least he got his day with the cup, but I don't have Delzato in the redraft. I think he'll take his cup ring over being in my redraft. I'm pretty sure on that. At 21, let's continue this run on defensemen with Travis Hamonic, who was originally drafted at 53. So that's two Calgary Flame defensemen in that draft, Hamonic and Brody. And there's been rumors tied to either one of them being traded during the season. Of course, it didn't happen due to injuries that were taking place with Calgary around the deadline. But both pretty solid defensemen. And yeah, do we keep that run on defensemen going? We do. We absolutely do. So the Edmonton Oilers, who ended up with Justin Schultz before they gave him away to Pittsburgh, who made him better. In this one, instead, Jordan Eberle, I have them taking Jake Gardiner. Jake Gardiner at 22. So that's quite the run on defensemen. Myers, Spurgeon, Brody, Schultz, Demers, Hamonic, Gardiner. You add two of them to a blue line that in its top four has Doughty, Yossi, Carlson, Pietrangelo, and the other Carlson. So four of those five are your top four. One of them is your number 5, and then one of these guys can be the number 6. So an absolutely ridiculous, expensive blue line. But it's a ridiculous blue line. Yeah, 2008 draft, the year of the defenseman, apparently. Number 23. Zach Smith, who moved on from the Ottawa Senators, having a pretty good year at the time of the pause. We'll see whether or not he can follow that up next year. But he's proven he can score 20 goals. He can push for 30. And, yeah, pretty good all-around forward. Obviously not in the same category as Steven Stamkos over there, or I would argue Adam Henrique either. And again, I do expect there maybe to be some pushback on Henrique being that high. But, yeah, that's just, for me. So your top 6, Stamkos, Henrique, Nyquist, Bailey, Atkinson, Eberle, Smith, Stepan. You can put together a pretty good forward group, just not all the Hall of Fame defensemen. And then we'll go back to blue liners, because why not? The New Jersey Devils. I have Borokop going here. Yeah, Borokop going at 24. And honestly, he has come into his own this year. He decided, okay, I've got a contract coming up. I'm going to change my game. And he showed he can play offense. Mark Borowiecki can play offense. And he's not bad at it. He can produce some points. And that's on top of the physical skills that he has, his physical ability. So, yeah, I think Borowiecki's a guy who's trending in the right direction. 12 years after his draft year, he's trending up, which is unusual. For a lot of these guys, they're either at their peak. Some of them may very well be on the way down. To see a guy and go, I think his best years may still be ahead of him, at least offensively. Borowiecki's there. Next up, so instead of Greg Nemish, the Calgary Flames, keeping that run on defenseman going, Marco Scandella moves up from 55 to 25. So he moves up 30 spots. Scandella and Borowiecki. Scandella, good run with St. Louis, signs that extension, but based on his overall play throughout his career, we'll see if he can keep that up. We'll see if next year in St. Louis he plays as well as he did after being acquired by them. I hope he does. I absolutely hope he does. But between Borowiecki and Scandella, if you want to argue Scandella over Borowiecki, I have a problem with that. Obviously, these are really kind of casual, fun little videos that I do, and I don't take them I don't take them anywhere near as seriously as people watching them seem to. Why do you hate Bobby Ryan? I don't hate Bobby Ryan. But that's an argument that I've been making to people for a long time, that I don't hate Bobby Ryan. Next up is Zach Bogosian. So Bogosian ends up in Buffalo. How's that for irony? Bogosian goes to Buffalo. He eventually would go to Buffalo and then leave Buffalo. So there's Zach Bogosian, and he was there for a while. So he goes at 26 rather than at 3, which is a pretty big fall, but had to be expected. A lot of it's injuries, too. I think part of the reason he never reaches his full potential is injuries. So we're up to number 27. Bottom 6 forward here who's very popular with his teammates and can fill into top 7 when need be, and that's Matt Calvert. You want to argue Calvert over Bogosian and Scandella and Borowiecki? Cool. Again, because, you know, I just look at these lists and I go, yep, this is how I would draft them if I was the GM. And, yeah, Calvert's been a good bottom 6 forward, very popular with Colorado. Columbus fans were unhappy when he left. Wanted him to stick around there, and I can understand why. I've always cheered for Calvert, and yeah, so I have him at 27. Number 28, another forward on the list. Another one named Matt, too. Matt Martin. Matt Martin hits everything that moves, ends up in Arizona. He'd fit in with the Arizona team. He's a free agent this summer, so who knows? Maybe Arizona picks him up. The thing is, they need goals. Martin's not the guy for goals. If Martin scored goals on a regular basis, he might break up this defenseman schmozzle I've got going on from here to here. Almost 10 defensemen in a row there. But Matt Martin, the physical game and just the intangibles, he's got that, so he still gets into the first round for me. 29, guy who's having a pretty darn solid season and dropping down from his original draft position, but not by a lot, and that's Tyler Ennis. So Atlanta would get Yossi and Ennis. Yeah, that's better than Bogosian and Lavallée in all likelihood. Because while I do have Bogosian ahead of Ennis, Yossi's pretty good. So, again, who knows how things might have turned out in Atlanta if they had drafted that well. So at 30, is it Tom McCollum? No. I have Colin Wilson, who was a first-round draft pick right there for Nashville, ending up being taken 30th overall by the Detroit Red Wings. So, for players who didn't end up making the cut, Luke Shen, as I said, was an honorable mention. Nikita Filatov played 53 games, not still in the league. Cody Hodgson, 328 games. Solid enough career, but I couldn't put him ahead of Colin Wilson, who's still in the NHL. And then Kyle Beach, who never made the NHL. He's playing overseas. Colton Tubert, 24 games for him. Zach Boychuk, he drops out. 127 games played. No offense to Zach if he sees this. Joe Colborne, 295 games played in the NHL. Not too bad, but I still don't have him in the first round. Chet Pickard, no games played for him. Spiza and Delzato are both honorable mentions. Anton Gustafsson, 0 games played. He, of course, doesn't get redrafted. Tyler Kuma doesn't get drafted. Matthias Tedemby doesn't get drafted. Greg Nemish, and this, again, for the first round. They might have got drafted in the second round if you redid the second round, which I'm not going to do. And then you've got Victor Tikhonov, 111 games played. Lavallée and McCollum all dropping out. So there you go. The 2008 draft. Second take, and I think we got it. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And again, I just pick a draft. I just pick it at random, the same way as I do with other playlists. I just pick something at random, and we see how it turns out. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. Hit like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you again soon.